Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli back answering more social media questions. And we've got a great question from James who asks, when nothing else seems to work, what is your go-to technique for finicky bass? Man, what a great question, James. You know, I'm going to have to say my go-to technique is finesse fishing, but in particular, a shaky head. Over the years, I've caught more bass under more conditions, especially tough conditions, on a shaky head than any other lure. You know, shaky head fishing for me puts the lure in places any other bait can go, a jig, a spinnerbait, a crankbait. It does it in a way where the lure has a unique motion on the fall, and then on the bottom, with that tail sticking up and I'm able to just twitch it, it really enacts a lot of strikes. One of the keys to me with the shaky head is to use a straight tail worm and a worm that has a flat bottom. And I always want the flat bottom of that worm facing down. About 50% of my strikes will come on the fall. The other half is going to come on the bottom as I'm shaking that rod. One of the keys to the shaky head for me, throw it where you'd throw any other lure. Throw it in the cover, in the brush, under the dock. Throw it right in the stuff, just like you would any other bait. If you get into a tough situation, if you can't catch them on anything else, try a shaky head, and I promise you, you're going to get a couple bites on it. And we've got a question from Mike, and it's a really good question. And I get this question a lot, and his question is, how long do you stay in a spot before you leave? Man, that's such a great question. And I used to struggle with that, but I've got a theory now that I've developed on the right time to start making moves in an area. And I call it the hour rule. And basically, Mike, what it is if you get to your spot and you have confidence they're there, and if in an hour, 1 hour, you haven't got a bite, you need to make a change. My first change after that hour is usually changing baits or changing a little bit in that area, going a little shallower or a little deeper. And then I'll do it again for another hour. And if in that next hour I don't get a bite, I need to make another change, and that's usually a move to a different area. But use that hour rule, you know? If in 60 minutes you don't have a bite, if nothing's happening, it's time to make a change in that area, or it's time to leave and go to another spot. Great question, Mike. Stay an hour. If you don't get bit, take off. And we've got a great question from Mark here, and he wants to know, when you're catching all small fish, what's the best way to catch a big one or catch a kicker? Man, that's a great question, and I'm in that position a lot. And I'm going to give you 2 different methods that I use to catch a big fish when everything's small. And the first one is something you've probably heard already, which is called a big bait, big bass theory. You know, if I'm in an area and all the fish I'm catching are pound, 2 pounds, they're all the same size, a lot of times I will upsize my bait. I'll go to a really big lure. I'll go to a 10 or 12-inch worm. I'll go to a big swim bait. I'll go to a jig with a mop skirt. It's a real big presentation. It's a true rule of thumb. The bigger the bait, the bigger the bass you're going to catch. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do to catch big ones is a rule that I have, which is called deeper or thicker. And all that means is that a lot of times the biggest bass in an area will live in a little bit deeper water than what you're fishing, or they're going to be thicker in the cover where you're fishing. So if I'm flipping a weed edge on the outside and I'm catching all 2-pounders, I'm going to take a punch bait and I'm going to flip in the thickest part of the interior of that weed bed. That's where those big ones live. Same thing if you're fishing out on a point. if I'm catching fish in 10 to 12 foot of water and they're all 2-pounders, I'm going to put a deeper diving crankbait on or a Carolina rig, and I'm going to go out to 15 to 20 foot of water behind where I've been catching them, and that's where those big ones are going to be. Great question. If you're looking for a big fish, use a bigger bait, go deeper or thicker, and you're going to get that kicker bite.